So my name's Gabrielle O'Brien and my pronouns are she and her. My role is Senior Project Officer at ADCET, collaborating with ADCET and NDCO on this event. This session is being recorded and live captioned. To enable captioning, please click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. We also have captions available via the browser, which will now be added to the chat box. Please note requirements for captioning and etiquette for this session to run smoothly are on the ADCET UDL symposium page at www.adscet.edu.au/UDL-symposium. I want to welcome you to this session being run by Dr. Sandra Thom-Jones. The session topic is called Why Are Autistic People Cautiously Excited About UDL in University? So over to you, Sandra.
Thank you. My name's Sandra Thom-Jones. My pronouns are she, her, and thank you for coming to this session. So obviously, as said, the session's being recorded. If you don't want to appear on the screen, please hide your camera. The session's being captioned. We will be holding questions to the end. So if you have a question, please pop it in the chat. And Gab will be monitoring the chat and make sure that I answer your questions at the end, and make sure that your microphones are off during the session, and obviously on if you're asking a question. I begin today by acknowledging that I am presenting this session from the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you're all working today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this symposium. So what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Autistic Australians, and particularly Autistic Australians in the higher education sector. I'm going to talk about applying UDL approaches to autistic learning, and also a couple of caveats. So you'll notice that the title of my presentation was Why Autistic People Are Cautiously Excited. I'm also conscious that I talk very fast, and I just remembered that the note said talk at a moderate pace. So Gab, wave your hand if I get too fast again. Okay, so this is ABS statistics on post-secondary qualifications in Australia. As you can see, there's a dramatic difference between autistic people with a post-secondary qualification and the proportion of people with any disability with a post-secondary qualification, and no disability and a post-secondary qualification. So autistic people are far less likely in Australia and in many countries to have a post-secondary qualification, and also significantly less likely to be in paid employment than people with any disability or no disability. And there's increasing evidence that our low enrolment rates and low completion rates are not a function of lack of capability. This is not due to not being able to cope with the work or have the intellectual capacity to do the tasks. It's about the structural, social and environmental barriers that we face at university, at TAFE, in school and in employment. And there's just a couple of quotes there from students that we've spoken to, in some of the work that I've been doing in supporting universities to actually be a bit more inclusive and appropriately established for autistic students. One of the things that's quite common is students saying that, we go through school and these systems and processes are in place. There's a recognition that there are certain things that autistic students need in order to be able to do well at school. And then we get to university and those things are gone. It's like, you turn 18 and suddenly all the supports are taken away from you. And so we go into university and there's almost this expectation that, well, you were able to get into university, therefore you're able to cope at university. And all of those supports that you needed, you'll just have to manage without them. and a lot of concerns around you're in the system and you can't get the information that you need. You can't find out where the supports are. So these students are coming into the system, they've got the capacity to do well, but they can't actually find or access the resources that they need. And so, I think there are some real benefits to UDL in being able to address at least some of these challenges for autistic students. So I wanted to talk about this in terms of those three key components of UDL. So firstly, I want to talk about why autistic people learn. And one of the things that makes autistic students great students is we tend to learn because we're passionate. One of the things that surprised me when I went to university, and it surprised both of my sons who are also autistic when they went to university, is the number of non-autistic students who say, oh, I'm here because I have to get a degree, because I have to get a job, or I'm here because my parents told me to come. We go to uni because we love to learn. We're really, really interested in gaining knowledge. And I think that's really, really important, that we come with that passion for knowledge. Things capture our interest. And that's one of those key aspects of autistic people, that ability to focus, that passion for knowledge, that really burning desire to know everything there is to know about our areas of specific interest. But the problem for us in a lot of cases then is that can lead to really patchy outcomes. So this is a summarized description of my grades when I was at university. I did really, really well in some subjects and I struggled with others, because if I was passionate and engaged and interested and it made sense to me, I did really well. And if it was totally not something that I was interested in or could see a value for or a reason for learning it, I really struggled. And lots of autistic students have those problems. Once we get going, though, we can't stop at one. I mean, I have 7 university degrees. I love learning. And so many of the autistic people that I've recently completed a project with 37 autistic academics who are out there working in university roles. And so many of them have multiple degrees because we love to learn. So that really reiterates that point, that our challenges are not about the knowledge. It's not about the learning. So what can universal design for learning do in this space? For teachers, we can find ways to connect coursework to autistic interests. If you can connect what you're teaching students to the things that they're interested in, the things that they're passionate about, the things that they understand, they will learn and they will thrive. Provide opportunities for us to contribute our expertise. You have students there in the classroom who have really in-depth knowledge on topics. Give them an opportunity to shine. Give them an opportunity to contribute, to share the things that they know. Allow for interest-related extension activities. Maybe the subject doesn't lend itself directly to the things that that student is passionate about or knowledgeable about, but are there opportunities for them to just do a little bit of an extension work, a little bit of a twist on the activity, so they can bring in the things that they're really passionate about? And don't stomp on our enthusiasm. I've seen far too many instances where a student will say, oh, actually, this really relates to this thing that I'm interested in. And then the teacher says, oh, that's not relevant, or that's not what we're talking about today. If you're an autistic student who feels uncomfortable speaking up in class, who already feels isolated and excluded from everyone else, and then you have something to say and your teacher shuts you down the first time, that student's not going to speak in class for the rest of the semester. So don't, I think there's a lot that we can do to really use these opportunities to connect. And for administrators, I would say, really think about flexibility in course structure. Are core units really core? If we've got students who are there because they're passionate and they're enthusiastic and they do so well in subjects that they're engaged in, and they struggle with ones that they don't understand the reason for, are they really core? Do they really need that subject? Is there some way we could work within our UDL framework and say, is there some flexibility? Is there another subject they could pick up instead? I mean, I realize in some courses that's not possible. Can't do nursing and not do anatomy. But, in a lot of cases, are the core units really core? Okay, the ways that we learn. we have lots of communication barriers as autistic people. It's not that we communicate wrong, we communicate differently. And there's lots of evidence that autistic people communicate really well with other autistic people. It's a bit like saying there's a problem with the way that French people talk because they can't communicate straight up with Chinese people. We speak differently. Autistic people communicate really well with other autistic people, and non-autistic people communicate really well with other non-autistic people. It's called the double empathy problem. We communicate differently to you. We express ourselves differently. We use words in a different way. We often find it difficult to understand the things that you say to us. Our receptive communication is different. We often have trouble with complex multi-part instructions. We need things clearly explained, and also non-verbal communication. So things like eye contact, which to non-autistic people seems to be very important, and to us is actually a really uncomfortable, for a lot of us, is a really uncomfortable, painful thing that actually makes it difficult for us to process information and to actually listen to what you're saying. So there's all these communication barriers that make it very difficult for us to be in a classroom, interacting with other students, interacting with teachers. And again, you know, UDL recognises that we all have different ways of learning. And so there's some opportunities here for autistic students to be acknowledged and to accept that the ways that we communicate, the way we express ourselves, the way we understand other people is different, and that's okay. We have different learning styles. Some of us will be really visual processors and have difficulty with verbal information. And that, again, is something that really needs to be taken into consideration in why are we doing really well in some subjects and not in other subjects? Why do we struggle with some assignments? And often the way that things are currently done outside of the UDL framework is, this is the way we teach it, this is the way we communicate it, and if you don't get it, then you know you shouldn't be here, which is really problematic. And also, so much of the learning environment is really challenging for autistic people as it's currently structured. Many of us have sensory challenges. We struggle with things like bright lights and loud noises and a whole range of things that are really constant in higher education environments. So if you are a person who has all those sensory challenges and you're sitting in a really brightly lit classroom that's packed with other students and it's loud and it's noisy and you're trying to process all this information, it can be really, really difficult. You can go to a lecture with 100 other students in it and be using so much of your cognitive energy to process all of that you go away and you only picked up a quarter of the lecture content. Our communication challenges. So this is probably one of the most common problems I see with students, autistic students, is that because we communicate differently, we often need guidance on some of the things that are really obvious to non-autistic people. You have subtle cues that we don't necessarily pick up. So one of the things that I hear a lot is, this is a common study tip you get all the time, you give to students: highlight the key points in your notes every week, right? So then when you get to the end of exam time, all you've got to do is read the highlighted parts, because those are the key bits. And my book at the end of semester, and pretty much every autistic student I know, their books at the end of semester look like this book on the right-hand side. Because how do I know what's a key point? I don't know what's a key point in a lecture or in a textbook. I think that everything might be important, because I don't have that ability to see through and pick up between the lines. So if you're teaching me, don't hint what the main ideas are, right? Tell me, give me a summary at the end. Don't drop subtle hints that something might be an exam and expect me to pick it up.
Hey, so, Sandra, it might be useful to go back to that slide and just explain to people what was pictorially on the slide, and a bit of background about your dolls and exemplars.
Okay, so sorry. So one of the things that I do as a consultant is I provide examples of what it's like to live as an autistic person in a simple visual format to explain it to people who are not familiar with autistic people. And I use dolls as people because I can pose them in any sort of situation, and they're sort of universal. So I picture common situations that autistic people find themselves in, and I explain what's happening in their heads and the way they're experiencing the world. So in this particular example, in the first slide, which shows week 1 of a class, we've got an autistic student sitting in the class, and the teacher's standing there, and she says, an important study tip is to highlight the key points in your notes each week. Then when it's exam time, you just need to revise the highlighted parts. And the student, Alex, who's my alter ego, that little doll there sitting in the chair, she says, yeah, I can do that. And then exam week comes, and in the second slide, we have Alex sitting there. She's got her book open, and she's looking at the page, and every single word and every single diagram is covered in yellow highlighter. And there's a thought bubble coming out of her head, and she says, only 600 more pages to remember. And then the text says, it isn't obvious to me what the key points are in a lecture or in a textbook. I think that every sentence might be the most important one. So you can help me by telling me, not hinting at, what the main ideas are. Bullet point summary at the end of a presentation or in lecture notes can really help me learn. So if you are teaching autistic students, those sorts of hints that we often see teachers use, like a hint about what might be in the exam, you know, those sort of subtle comments about, oh, important to pay attention to this, or, you know, this is really, we don't pick those up because we're not great at picking up those subtle hints and nods and winks and those sorts of things. Everything seems important to us. And those things can make it really, really difficult. So many autistic students go home and they reread and they try to remember every word in the textbook, every line of the lecture, every point in the slides. And so then when they get to the end of the semester, they are exhausted, absolutely exhausted from trying to absorb all of that information. So again, this is where, you know, a lot of the things that UDL recommends we do can really, really support autistic students. Provide information in different formats. So if you're talking stuff in a lecture, I am going to be frantically trying to write down every single thing that you say because I don't know what's important. If there are certain things that are more important for me to remember than others, then, you know, make sure I know that. If you're going to tell me stuff and also put it on the slides, that's really helpful. If there's additional notes or context that you can provide, you know, that idea of there's a video you can watch, different formats make it really much more accessible. So I might be a visual learner, I might be a verbal learner, I might be a learner who learns by doing. So providing information in different formats is really good. You notice I've got there in brackets, but not competing formats, because one of the worst things is when you tell me something in class and then I read it in the textbook you told me to read and they say different things, because then I'm really confused. I don't know how to resolve that. Decode subject outlines. Subject outlines are really, really confusing when they tell me what's going to happen and it doesn't happen, or it doesn't make sense, or I really cannot work out from that what it is that you want me to do. Clarify important content, don't hint. If you really want me to remember something, to learn something, to focus on something, specifically tell me. Check our understanding. Many of us have gone through our whole lives being told that we're dumb, or we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not coping. We're very unlikely to say, I don't get that. We're going to nod, we're going to agree, we're going to walk out of the room and think, I really didn't get that. Give us an opportunity to check that we did understand what it is that you wanted us to do. And importantly, accept and support different ways of learning and different ways of being. If your autistic student comes into class and they've got headphones on and they've got sunglasses on and they're playing with a fidget toy, chances are that is the most focused, interested student in your classroom. They're not there because they're not interested. They've got their noise cancelling headphones on so they can listen to you and they're not distracted by the other student nattering. They've got their sunglasses on so they can focus on you and not on the lights that are shining too bright. They've got their fidget toy in their hand so that they can channel their sensory energy and not be distracted by everything else and focus on you. So really being aware of those different ways of learning and different ways of being can really help us to thrive in the university environment. And again, this is where, this is really consistent with universal design for learning, because doing all of those things won't just help us autistic students, they'll help everybody. Administrators, some of the things you can do: aim for consistency across courses. Why is it? I'm talking to a student yesterday who's enrolled in a Bachelor of Creative Arts, and each subject this student does has a different referencing format. Some of them want MLA and some of them want Harvard. Why? Why is it not consistent across the whole course? Why do they want different ways of doing things? So that I've learned the rules. As an autistic person, I like rules. I learn the rules and then I go to the next subject and the rules are different. Make information available early. This is a cohort of students who really struggle with anxiety and uncertainty. If I can get access to the subject outline ahead of time, so I know what's expected of me, I can plan for it, I know when the classes are, I know what assignments I've got, I can schedule my time, I can work out what's happening, I'm going to be able to be much more prepared. Create sensory-friendly campuses. Can we have rooms where there's a quiet space? That's one of the things I work with universities around, going and having a look at the spaces that they've got set up. Are there ways we can modify that? Are there places we can make more accessible for autistic students? Can we map the campus to find some spaces, some safe ways for autistic students to move around? And providing accessible support services, because all of these things that I'm saying teachers should do, not all of them can. Many of them want to, but some of these things, that people need to be trained how to do them. So providing those accessible support services, a central service that can do these things if teachers are going to struggle with them. Okay, next, how we show what we learn. As I said before, we have different communication skills. We have challenges, but we also have strengths, right? There are some things autistic people do really well, and we do better than non-autistic people. We do our best when assignments are meaningful and we can see how they connect to our learning and to our reasons for studying. If I know why you want me to do that assignment, if I know how it connects to what I'm learning, and I can see how this assignment matters, it means something, then I'm going to do if I look at some of the assignments I've seen from some of the autistic students, and they can see, okay, this demonstrates my learning, but I can also take this assignment and I can use it to help someone or to make a difference or to support someone, you get fantastic pieces of work. But we really struggle with ambiguous rubrics. Rubrics, the way we set assignments in universities is appalling. You read it and, I'm a professor. I've got 6 degrees, 7 degrees. And I still look at rubrics from undergraduate courses and I think, I don't understand what you want the student to do. What does that actually mean? Lots of autistic students find oral presentations challenging. People who have a different communication style, a different way of moving, acting, using our bodies, and then we need to stand there and present in front of other people, that's challenging. And group work is really, really hard. I have a visual here again using Alex and the dolls. So this is a group work. So Alex is looking at her course outline. It says, assignment 2, form groups of 4 and collaborate on a case study. Alex goes up to 2 girls standing in the corner of the classroom and she says, hi, I'm Alex. Can I join your group? And they say, no, sorry, we're already in a group. We've been study buddies for all year. And Alex walks off dejected and a thought bubble coming out of her head. And she says, wonder if I can do it by myself, or maybe I should just drop out. That's such a common experience for autistic students. Group work. Group work, we get students to do group work all the time. Is this real life? Or, is it just a fantasy? We do group work, like I work in a group, we all do. But when in your job have you ever had a group work assignment where your boss says to you, hey, Gab, I want you to work in this group of people you've never met before. Your career is going to really be impacted by the outcomes of this piece of group work. Two of the people in the group really don't care. They're just here for laughs. Two of the people are hardly ever going to turn up. The other people are going to want to have the meetings in the pub. That's not how it works. But that's how it often works in the group work we expect students to do in classes. So if we're actually saying you're doing this group work to demonstrate your ability to work in a group in your profession, then the group work we make them do in class should look like the group work they're going to do in real life, and it doesn't. What can we do? Teachers, clear assignments and rubrics, really clear. What is it you want us to do? What does it look like? Give students a range of options for their presentations. Can they present individually? Can they video record themselves? Can they, are there other ways? Appropriate use of group work, not in every single assignment in every single subject, but a reasonable amount and, in a way that's actually realistic. Link assignments to pragmatics. Does the assignment make sense? Does it have a purpose? Does it do something meaningful? And for administrators, balance assessments across courses so that we're not having to do the same challenging type of assignment again and again. And autism-informed review of assessment materials. Okay, now very quickly, because I know I've run out of time, my caveats. Sensory challenges. UDL says we should present information in multiple formats to address the diverse communication needs. And absolutely autistic people, as I mentioned, multiple formats is great, but it can also be overstimulating. So if you present me something and it's got a video and it's got captions and it's got music and it's got all those other things, yes, those multiple formats are great, but for an autistic person, that can be really overstimulating. Multiple formats are great, but sometimes I might need one format at a time. I find that if I'm watching a video and it's got people talking and it's got music playing in the background, that background music is just as loud as the talking, and I can't hear the talking over the music. So think about how we can avoid that. Executive function challenges. We can be overwhelmed by too many choices. So UDL says give us choices, but don't give us too many unless you're going to give us strategies to support our decision making. Don't say you can do a this or a this or a this or a this and you can choose from 27 different tasks, because a week before the assignment's due, I'm still trying to decide which task. So help me choose which is the most appropriate for my skills and my learning needs. And every autistic person is different, just like every non-autistic person is different. So there's a risk that the implementation of UDL could mean that individual needs are overlooked or minimised. So teachers saying, well, we have this universal design, you have all these supports, you have all these options, you're fine. We need to recognise that autistic people come with specific sets of challenges and need to be able to say, this thing I really need some support with.
Well, Sandra, that's all we have time for today. So thank you very much for presenting today. I'll just remind people that I've put Sandra's emails into the chat, and we also have an interview with Sandra on Talking Tertiary on the ADCET website. So that's worth a listen as well. Sandra shares more of her experiences on there. So thank you again, Sandra. And I just encourage everyone to move on to their next session now. Thank you.